And we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is George. I'm with Minucia, and I'm with Kevin Indig, whom I guess you already know. I will do the introduction still. Kevin, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. This is already a lot of fun. We had a bit of a conversation before this started, so I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, me too. So I would like to welcome everyone. I see a lot of familiar names here. Daniela, welcome. Arnaud, Maria Elena, Philip, Joanna, Victoria, Olexi, Maria, Tatiana, Ilya, Tanya. I see many people here. Christos from our team, Stefan, Ryan. That's great. So welcome, everyone. This is going to be an AMA with Kevin. We are discussing the, future of organic growth and strategy, and how you can future-proof your organic strategy. I think, and I guess you will agree with me, the AMA is very timely because of all the changes that we are under right now. And we will get right into it. Before we start with some of the questions we prepared for Kevin for today, let me just give an intro, even though I think that Kevin doesn't need any introductions from me, but still, Kevin Indig is a growth advisor and angel investor who helps the world's market leaders define and evolve their organic growth strategy. He previously led SEO and growth for Shopify, G2, and Atlassian. Once a week, Kevin sends an email with organic growth strategies and case studies to over 10K subscribers. I think the number is a bit higher now, so correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin. And this newsletter is called The Growth Memo. He also co-hosts the Contrarian Marketing Podcast with Eli Svarch, which gives you ideas you might not be thinking about. And let's get right into it. First question I have for you, Kevin. Google announced SGE, which stands for Search Generative Experience, almost a year ago. As it was beta testing this new search feature, many people in the SEO industry said that Google may not roll it out to the public. Despite all that, Google rolled out SGE a few weeks ago. My question is, what are your first impressions of SGE so far?
Totally. And thanks for the kind introduction, George. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, George and team, for having me. Now, regarding your point about SGE, I'm going to be honest. I was one of the people who said, I don't think that Google will roll it out, and they rolled it out. So, I just want to take responsibility there and say I was wrong. I was very surprised for many reasons. I didn't see, quote unquote, the need for Google to roll this out, but there could have been many reasons for why they did it in the end. It could be optics and shareholder pleasing. It could be that actually they saw a bigger competition from ChatGPT, Perplexity, and co. Or they just wanted to disrupt themselves before anybody else did. Either way, here we are. The thing is live. And so I've had the luck to spend some time with AI overviews. And some of the early observations for me are that they work very differently than anything else we see in search. They look like featured snippets, but they're not exactly the same thing. So some differences are that AI overviews are really good at synthesizing information. So when you click into the sources of AI overviews, you most of the time get to the page and see the text highlighted that AI overviews use to give the answer. And most of the time, they're actually not the same thing. You'll sometimes see the same sentences, but most of the time, they're rewritten. And so what's so mind-blowing about AI overviews to me is that it really seems to synthesize information from web pages and then present them in a coherent way. AI overviews also pull information from YouTube videos, but not from the description or the title, or not even the timestamps, but actually from the transcript. And again, even the transcripts, AI overviews are able to pick up information and then structure it. So I gave an example recently in a video for my paid subscribers about a question about insurance. And so the answer was in a YouTube video, but it was not structured in any way. And the AI overviews took that content and created a bulleted list that made perfect sense to give the answer. So these things work fundamentally different. They do link out to other sources, but there are way fewer sites represented in AI overview. So you might still have maybe 10 sources, and the number depends on the answer, right? But you might have 10 sources, but these 10 sources might comprise of maybe 5 different websites, right? So there is a consolidation of the number of outgoing links, and we still have no idea if people click those sources, which ones they click, if there is preferential treatment to the first link in the carousel, et cetera, et cetera. So there's too many open questions. But what I can already say is those things work differently. They don't always pull from the top search results, but sometimes they will. And there's some like very interesting relationships between the n-grams in the AI overview and the sources. So I don't want to get too deep and too technical, but long story short, it does still seem to matter to have the main entity in your content that the AI refers to. So if the question is, what is a deductible in insurance, then having the word insurance deductible in your content still matters, right? So there's still some sort of a keyword representation factor, if you will, in your content. But the synthesization aspect of AI overviews is really interesting. I'm going to pause there because there's obviously you can tell like I can talk for like probably 50 more minutes, but I want to give you a chance to ask other questions as well.
Thank you. One thing I would like to say, because I see that people are still tuning in. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them either in the chat or click the questions button and simply ask your question. Okay, we will take questions at the end, so please feel free to any questions you may have. Now, I would like to zoom out for a minute and say that there is a lot of chatter about how Google is moving toward zero-click, and there are many voices that damage the SEO industry, at least on a perceptual level, by evangelizing, zero-click and all the consequences that zero-click has for search, right? My question to you is, do you see SGE as an accelerator toward zero-click search, as Google's search effort to keep up with the competition, namely ChatGPT or Perplexity, or a simple search feature which results in volatility in SERPs and traffic fluctuations?
Yeah, what's interesting about zero-click, or this idea of zero-click marketing, is that it is grounded in a fact that we see today, which is that the web is becoming more passive everywhere we look, right? So on social networks, you see less and less engagements. People like less, people reshare less, people comment less. On video, on YouTube, they upvote less, or they give fewer thumbs up. And I think in a similar vein, there's something happening in search where, first of all, people get more answers directly in the search results. That has been going on for years, and it's getting more extreme, especially now with AI overviews. And so there's just generally less of a desire and less of a need to engage with content on the open and on the closed web. I think that's generally a fact. And that's, I think, a little bit where zero-click marketing comes from, because you still get impressions. And so it just brings marketing closer to a brand channel than to a performance channel. I mean, when I say marketing, I mean mostly content generation, right? It becomes more of a brand thing than a performance thing, whether that means social content or content in SEO. And so I think there's something to be said about the benefit. I mean, if you look at it, right, like companies spend millions of dollars on brand marketing. They will literally spend many millions of dollars to have a tiny logo on the halo of a Formula One car, right? So there's still a lot of value in brand marketing, and I think the challenge is for SEO more and more, and for content, how you pitch it and how you sell it. If you sell it as a performance vehicle, and you need to make an estimation of what the ROI is, especially per piece, right, per content piece, that's getting harder and harder. And so, but at the same time, a lot of marketers are still very attached to that performance model, and we haven't yet embraced the brand model. So that's what I would say about zero-click marketing. I think there could be a better positioning for content and SEO in some cases where it's just more of a brand channel. That depends a little bit on the company as well. If we're talking about companies that create content themselves, like in SaaS or as a direct consumer e-commerce startup, for example, that's the case there. But then there are other aspects as well where you have marketplaces or large retailers, and for them, content, quote unquote, content or SEO is still more of a performance marketing channel. So I see that trend happening in general. But then there's also this interesting overall aspect you also mentioned in regards to ChatGPT and Perplexity, where simple answers, there's just no business value you can generate anymore. And that's not new. I think that started with featured snippets. That was really the kind of the ring for the the bell for the boxing ring, where that whole thing started, where simple questions, there's just no value to grab anymore. And ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini just intensify that, right? So a simple answer a couple of years ago could have been, what's the weather today? What's the score of the latest soccer match or something like that? And those are very basic, simple answers that don't send out traffic anymore. And now we go maybe a couple clicks deeper, where a simple answer could now be, what's the definition of this thing? What does that mean? Mostly what questions, right? I think what questions are much, much harder to monetize, if possible at all. But there's still a lot of value to be gained from addressing how questions. How is much more difficult and complex. And so that's where I think that's where you still want to invest, because ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, and co, maybe even Google, if they give an answer, it's mostly not enough. And a lot of times they're missing important context. And I think that's where a lot of the opportunity for content is.
Thank you. I see that we have some good questions coming in, and we will start pulling up some questions. I will ask your question. I had it noted, so I will ask your question. Kirkland, sorry. We may ask yours, and Philip, yours is also interesting. We may ask it a bit later. So for now, I would like to ask, on a very practical level, do you think SEO is still a growth channel companies should invest in? Had you started or invested in, because you're also an angel investor in a SaaS company today, and the founder comes to you and says, Kevin, we are thinking about where we will allocate our marketing and growth spend. Would you use organic search as part of your growth strategy?
The answer is a clear yes. Absolutely. Would I allocate all of my budget into SEO? No. I think the thought that SEO is the only channel you need is probably does not work anymore these days. I think you need to have bets and activity in several channels, some paid, some organic, but I absolutely would invest in SEO. And to just build on the point, I take shares from a lot of my clients as payment. Not only shares, obviously there's a cash component as well, right? But I take shares also because I believe that the work that I'm doing with the companies will help those companies grow. Otherwise, I would take only cash. And so I am invested in companies as an investor and as an advisor. And a lot of these companies grow with SEO, sometimes mostly with SEO, sometimes SEO is a cherry on top. But it always plays a role in the marketing mix. And so I do think, though, that it's harder these days. You need to be more thoughtful about where you invest. And yet at the same time, I also think that, especially when we talk about content, we're not talking about an Uber Eats that has an inventory of, say, restaurants, or an all trails that aggregates hiking trails and attractions, or an event. We're not talking about these aggregators, right? We're talking about companies that create content themselves. I actually see an opportunity to not just create content for SEO, but create content for other channels as well. And this is where, this is a direction that I push a lot of companies into is if you call it SEO content and it's just for SEO, it probably is not going to work as well as if you create content that also performs in SEO, but you can send it out as a newsletter. You can repurpose it on maybe LinkedIn for some of your employees. You can maybe turn it into a YouTube video, right? So I think we just need to, and this is what I do with my clients, we need to raise the bar of what good content is. And so it's less of a volume game and it's much more of a quality game. And I think quality will always win. I do believe that there are things that machines cannot create in terms of content that only humans can create. And so as long as a company has understood that and holds itself to that bar and standard, I absolutely would invest in SEO. And I absolutely think it can help companies grow.
Okay, thank you for that record. I'm about to start a new company with a friend / partner of mine. One of the channels we are investing in is SEO. Okay, so I still believe there is opportunity there, and what a better testament to that I invest my own money right into that channel.
Yes.
I will go back to AI overviews for a minute, just to give Philip an answer. So Philip's question is with regards to AI overviews and how do you think Google can protect against inaccuracies? First of all, let me preface this by saying that, yes, they were beta testing this feature for a year, but we are talking about, I don't know, a very large or a feature that has very large scale, a very large scale impact on search. Having that said, I expect them to be improving, AI overviews over time as they get feedback from users and so on. But I would like to hear your thoughts on that, Kevin.
I do agree with you, George. I'm often critical of Google, but I also want to be fair, and I will say that I think before AI overviews were launched out of beta, they were getting much better towards the end in the beta. Now, I did not see Google launching this because I also thought it was a bit premature, and you find so many examples of misinformation and just borderline wrong stuff. But the benefit is that you can train neural nets pretty well. And there's no company, let me correct that. There may be 2 other companies in the world that have similar access to data compared to Google. And so I strongly expect Google to be more selective in the sources that they pull from. For example, Reddit. It's pretty easy these days to hijack AI overviews with Reddit answers because Google will just sometimes verbatim take them over. And so since Google has a contract with Reddit, they can be much more selective about, and I assume they will be much more selective about what they will include in AI overviews. I also expect them to train and refine AI overviews much more, not just in the sources that they pull from, but also in some of the statements that they make. And so Gemini, which powers AI overviews, is closely connected to Google's knowledge graph, right? They were advertising 1 billion facts. And so I think now that there's a neural net behind the knowledge graph, and then maybe it was before, right? But now that you have that direct feedback signal, I expect answers to get better rather quickly. Now, I don't want to say, they're getting better in 3 months or they're getting better in 6 months or something like that. But I assume it wouldn't take too long for some of these things to go away. Now, what I will also say, though, is that I think it's unrealistic to expect that misinformation and questionable information, right? It's not always misinformation. Sometimes just questionable. Sometimes it's harmful. I think the expectation that goes to zero is unrealistic, right? The challenge with AI overviews is that they are like a looking glass, like a magnifier to all of the poor information that is on the open web. And so on the one hand, I expect that these AI overviews are getting better in that term, but on the other hand, you also have to consider what does Google have to work with. I've long been for a long time been pretty loud about how the quality of content on the open web has not necessarily improved, right? It's getting harder. But I also think that there's an opportunity for us as marketers to then provide higher quality content, right? So, but yeah, long story short, I think it's a mix of training, being more selective in the sources Google pulls from, and also some fact-checking mechanism. I mean, there are fact-checking APIs these days where you can submit content and you'll get it fact-checked and reviewed. Google has fact-checking mechanisms in Google News already, so I would not be surprised if they don't, figure out how to do that at scale, and then find out a way to pick content less often from sources that have poor quality content, questionable content, and misinformation.
Speaking of that, there is a question from Kirkland regarding Reddit and whether you think that Reddit will continue to have the same level of cultural significance as Google intertwines itself there. Now, my thoughts on this is that they will gradually start pulling back a bit. Obviously, the integration of Reddit in search was a bit abrupt. That's why you see threads from 2011 for topics that may not have as fresh information or new things going on to be presented. But you know what? It's like a thread from 2011. What can that add to the conversation, right? So I see them pulling back a bit, but it also goes back to not what Google does, but what creators do. Because if we keep creating content that's soulless and plastic and sounds like every other content piece out there, then maybe the thread from 2011 is their best choice, right? But I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. And I just want to call out, I have to be a bit careful with what I say because Reddit is one of my clients that I'm working with right now. But I generally agree that I think, Google has to be a bit more careful about what they show from Reddit. And I think they're going to get there, especially now with that partnership between Reddit and Google. I will also say, though, that you'll often find, other like articles, blog content from 10 years ago. In certain business topics, you'll find HBR articles from 2011, from maybe even before the 2000s, right? Like old content sometimes. And sometimes it's because there's just no better alternative. So I think it goes back to the point that I just generally think that open web content has not gotten better in most cases, which is an opportunity for us. And Google tries to show, now, I do agree with you. I think that the Reddit signal is a little bit overblown. But when you talk to non-SEOs, you often find that they like Reddit answers for the most part. Now, it depends on what use case, right? If it comes to a medical question, for example, I don't necessarily want to see Reddit results. Sometimes, right? There are edge cases where it's helpful. For example, right now, it's summertime here in Michigan, and we're all having allergies, right? Our daughter started to have allergies. She's 14 months old. And so we, most allergy medicine is for kids older than 2 years. And so we spoke to our doctor, of course, but then we also wanted to see some experiences of other parents with that same allergy medicine. Now, that doesn't mean I start on Google asking which allergy medicine should I take, and I trust the subreddit, with the health of my kid. But these opinions are valuable. And I think as SEOs, we too often live in a bubble where we think that people don't use this, but the Reddit feature is used a lot. It gets a lot of engagement. And the way you can measure that is when Google, so right now they're testing the position of the discussions and forum module a lot. And if you are present on one of these SERPs and you see that the discussion and forums module ranks above you, take a look at your click-through rate, and you'll often see it goes down tremendously, even if you rank in some of the top 3 positions, right? And so these things are getting engagement, and they're getting clicks, and I think that's where Google is ranking them highly. At the same time, though, with misinformation or old information on Reddit, I think there's a denominator trap here where we don't know how many good answers there are and new and fresh answers compared to the old ones. But of course, we complain about the old ones on Twitter and co, right? So but I think the perspective and the context here is missing of how often is that really a problem. Again, I hope I didn't make the case only for Reddit. I do think Google has to do a better job here, but I also think that in SEOs, as SEOs, we're often in the bubble here, and we need to talk to more people outside the bubble to see if people really like that stuff or not.
Yeah, that's right. Because we often think that the way we think and approach things as marketers is the way, you know, people outside of marketing think and act and use these products. I see that we have many people leading teams from established companies, and some of the names stand out. And for all these people, I want to ask, what can established companies or companies with an established organic growth motion do to future-proof their organic strategy?
Yes. So there's a couple of things. One is a common pattern I see across probably all clients I work with is that they're missing monitoring systems. Monitoring systems means they have no idea how all of their content is performing. They're looking at metrics like organic traffic, organic clicks, ranks, but there is no monitoring system across the board that tells you, oh, here are 5 articles that need to be updated, or here's a whole topic where the traffic is trending down. So the first step that is important is to establish, you know, it's like a radar in the video game, so you can see the whole map, right? So you need to set up your radar, and one simple way is to just track organic clicks and organic rank per URL, right? Let's say per blog article over time on a weekly basis. That's a very basic system that just tells you, oh, here's some content that is decreasing in organic traffic, and here's some content that is increasing. And as a result, you oftentimes see that companies come out flat. So you need to set up your monitoring system to understand how, like, which content needs to be updated and refreshed and which content doesn't perform well. And that brings me to the second point. I think the right heuristic to use here is that every piece of content needs to pay rent. And what I mean by that is if a piece of content is not performing well, then something needs to be done about that piece of content. The answer cannot be to launch more content. The answer has to be that you need to go back to the content and either build more internal links, build more backlinks, improve the title, update the content. Maybe there's a section missing. Maybe it needs a video. Maybe it needs a better image. Maybe it needs, an author byline. But there's too often a mentality of just produce content and then forget about it. And that is something that does not work anymore in 24. I see that Google has a much higher bar for decreasing traffic to domains that have a certain amount of outdated or low quality content. And so it goes back to the first point, right? You need to understand what that content is, go back to it, refresh it, work with it. And so it clearly becomes more of a quality than a volume game. And then the third thing is you really want to keep your technical health in check. So I've noticed something with a client a couple of weeks or months ago where they had been growing organic traffic very consistently over the last 2 to 3 years. And then all of a sudden, overnight, organic traffic dipped by minus 60%. So a pretty strong decrease. And so we did some research and analysis, and we found out that a logic for a pagination broke and created a lot of duplicate content. As a result, Google immediately turned down traffic, and when we fixed it, immediately turned it back up. And that just goes to show that, we often say that technical SEO is not as important anymore because Google can understand things. I'm skeptical about that statement, but one area where it definitely doesn't ring true is in what you expose to Google's index. And so my third point is you need to keep your technical health in check, especially in regards to what URLs you give Google to index and what you take out of Google's index. And it goes back to looking at your Search Console report and fixing things like crawled not index or discovered not index, right? So you want to be very careful about only exposing high quality content to Google and kind of having a plan for low quality content over time, especially as companies get bigger, right? If you only have 50 articles on your site, doesn't matter as much. If you have 250, 500 pieces of content, all of a sudden it starts to matter a lot more. And then the last point that I'll mention is that most companies don't have a good grasp of engagement with their content. People are still stuck in, again, old metrics like ranks, organic clicks. Maybe I look at something like time on site or pages per visit, but I don't think these are good metrics. I think good metrics are combinations of several metrics, like what is the ratio of visitors to a piece of content, of the time spent on that piece of content compared to how long it should take them to read that piece of content, right? You can simply by the number of words and average reading time very quickly figure out how long it takes to read a piece of content. And you should measure how much time people spend to see, do they read all of that content? You can add scroll tracking to the mix and see when do they jump off? And then maybe should we go back to the piece of content and optimize the jumping off point? I also see no qualitative research happening where you maybe show a piece of content to an actual person and ask them, what is missing here? What else would you expect? What questions do you have? Or do you like the design of our blog? Like, can you wayfind? Can you perform a simple task that we give you on our website, right? All these things are not happening anymore. And it's in large part because we fell so in love with performance marketing. And so we don't talk to users anymore. But it's so critical because all these content platforms on the web, including Google, are so much more engagement driven. So, if I would summarize that, we have to update our metrics, set up monitoring systems, and then really be careful about the technical health of our site and what content we expose to Google. And the good news, once you have those systems set up, they will last for a very, very long time, maybe indefinitely. I want to promise, but I see companies that have these systems in place be successful over a very long time.
Thank you, Kevin. One question from the audience and then back to the questions I prepared. This one is from Liam. Do you think optimizing your site for featured snippets is now a waste of time due to the replacement of Google's AI and SG? I guess not replacement, but introduction. Thank you, Liam.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's both. I would go out and hunt and optimize for featured snippets until Google doesn't show them anymore. But I also am skeptic that Google will show them for a long time. It just, based on all the AI overviews that I've seen, it just does not make sense to show a featured snippet and the AI overview. And so I expect that Google will not show them when an AI overview is present and show them when an AI overview is not present anymore. That being said, though, the effort is typically not that high to optimize for a featured snippet. And so until they don't show anymore, I would still go for it.
Thank you. I'll take one more because it's one from our SEO lead, Antonis. Thank you, Antonis. So Antonis asks, what's your take on trending queries that presented a breakout state in trends or even floated the official Google community forum about setting off AI overviews? Do you think it will influence the product?
So I think trending keywords are really interesting. And it goes back to one of my biggest criticisms with the outdated SEO playbook that we do, which is that we typically give too much attention to search volume and we don't give enough attention to other indicators that certain questions or topics are important. And so trending queries or queries with growing search volume, that's one of my, I just love adding that to a keyword strategy or to a content strategy. And I think that's underrated. I think more companies should do that. And I love to find topics and questions that might have zero search volume, but through other ways, I have high conviction that people are actually searching for that kind of stuff, right? That's another really good one. So I think it's absolutely fine and good to prioritize them. Also because typically they don't have a lot of competition because everybody else just goes after the keywords with high search volume. Now, I don't want to say you should completely stop going after keywords with high search volume, but if you can, you want to probably spend 20 to 50% of your capacity going after keywords with no search volume where you know people are searching for them. I hope that answers all the questions. I think there was another part towards the end, but I'm not sure if I covered that. Let me know if I missed a part here, please.
The second part is whether this will influence the product. I guess by product, we mean AI overviews.
I see. Hard to say. I don't have the data for that yet. I could see different scenarios. One where if the query grows in search volume with a certain velocity, then I could see Google saying, okay, we want to trigger an AI overview for that. But I can also see that Google says, no, we just want to trigger it for a certain threshold. But the reality is we don't know enough about how they work yet to understand when Google triggers them and when not. So the honest answer is we need to do more research.
That makes sense. Daniela, thank you very much for your question. I guess Zach from our team can pull up some resources from Minucia's blog or even our YouTube channel or webinars we've done with ClearScope and other brands on content audit and how you should approach that. Moving on, I have another question. We covered how companies with an established growth motion, if we could put it that way, can future-proof their organic growth strategy. What about companies that don't have an established organic growth motion? How can these companies future-proof their organic growth strategy?
Yeah. It's a good question because I recently did an analysis of the top 1,000 domains that gained the most visibility on Google and the top 1,000 domains that lost the most visibility on Google. And so I did find a pattern where bigger domains grow faster. But I think that there's a potential misunderstanding here where we think that Google only rewards big domains because they're big. And I think what's actually going on, I mean, based on the data that I've seen, is that these domains just offer something. First of all, they do a lot of things right in SEO, and two, they offer a product or service or something that just makes them successful over the long term. And that's good news, right? So that means that you can grow on Google for a long time, but you need to have a differentiated product. And so if you're a newcomer, right, if you're relatively, let's say you're a startup, right? And I work with some startups that are relatively new, not brand new, but relatively new. And so again, like having the product awareness, brand awareness, investing in that, having a differentiated product or service, that's absolutely critical. And then two is, how do you start your journey into SEO? Do you go after some of the most difficult topics in the space, or do you go after new topics, which relates to the question we answered before? Or do you go after low competition terms? So I think a lot of there is in the SEO strategy, and a lot of there is stuff that has been known for a while, right? Where you go after low difficulty keywords, low competition keywords, and then again maybe some keywords that nobody else goes after just yet. Another trend that I've seen is that a lot of these newcomers, they don't have the same dependencies on a CMS. They have often a clean, updated design, right? So sometimes your advantage when you go up against big incumbents or companies that have been established for a long time is you can just ship faster, you can make changes faster, you look a little better and nicer. And so these are the strengths that I would lean strongly into. And then the last competitive advantage I will mention is that sometimes newcomers figure out different ways to drive organic traffic, maybe with a community or a forum, maybe with user-generated content in some degree, maybe with programmatic content, maybe with lead generation tools or quizzes. So newcomers have the advantage that they can just do things faster and try more, whereas established companies often are a bit slower. And that's something you can leverage, but you have to be strategic about it.
To that last point, I just want to mention, I guess people may find this useful for the new company we are going to launch with my friend. It's called Routine Base, and basically what it will have is daily routines of like successful people. For example, one of the first ones we are doing is for Andrew Huberman, and also advice on how to build healthy habits and routines and whatnot. So our strategy from the beginning is, okay, we need to find a differentiation point for daily routines, because we can't interview these people for the time being, at least. But what we came up with is routine difficulty, a proprietary metric, which is as simple as like low, medium, and high, that tells people that it's that difficult to follow the routine of Andrew Huberman, right? And then navigation on the page based on the like whether it's you want to see what this person is doing in the afternoon, in the evening, in the morning, and so on. Okay, they will press buttons to get to that specific section, right? And then on the other side, for content about how to build healthy routines, we are taking an approach where all content has to be, or at least most content will be, experience-based. What that means is that we are writing a piece of content on how to build a routine. This will be interview-based, and we will interview a person who has daily routines or daily routine template. We will, design a template based on, the template that the person who is doing it, who has experience with that, right? Or we are writing a piece of content on cold plunge benefits. We will actually interview someone who is doing it for years. That's not scalable. That's not cheap. In fact, it's very expensive, and it takes too much time to do. But as a newcomer, as you said, you have to have something like unique about you and your brand and your website and the way you approach your content. The problem is that most companies, and the way the game is built to a certain extent, because we are also a content marketing agency, they will not do that. So the way I try to communicate that, for example, for SaaS companies, if you want to write an alternatives page, which, yeah, it makes sense you want to do that because there is commercial search intent there and whatnot. Instead of creating a listicle with 22 alternatives, it's better to have someone from your team actually use 3 and make a piece of content about that. Like, we actually used the best 3 alternatives to whatever product. Here's our take, right? The problem is, once again, the way the game is played right now, almost no one is doing that, right? Because it's not easy. It takes time, and in a fast-moving and ever-changing world, you don't have the time to go and interview people or use products. Or I don't know what your take on this is, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think there's lots of cool opportunities here, right? On the one hand, I'd be curious who else writes about Huberman routine or anybody's routines, but maybe it's let's say it's a bigger company like the Men's Fitness magazine, or maybe a supplement brand. And so maybe one advantage you have is that you can just use technology to go through all the transcripts of Huberman interviews and then extract the key insights with AI and just build this kind of automated content creation motion. But then you can go ahead and maybe mix that with your own or somebody else's experience, right? So here's the Huberman routine. I tried it out for, 30 days. Here's what I learned. Give people the cliff notes at the top. And then you can maybe work with feedback signals from the readers. So what if there was a function where people can log in and create an account, and then it can say, I tried this routine and it really worked for me, or I tried this routine and it really did not work for me. And then you can generate content out of that. For a low-hanging fruit could be to just use AI to summarize the reviews, like on Amazon. Here's what the community thinks. But they can also do things like create profiles where you say, okay, this routine is hard to follow. This is easy to follow. And maybe there is a subsection where you say, for people with kids, this might be hard to follow. For students, this might be easy to follow based on community feedback. So I would, think about how can you build make these systems like community feedback. I'm just spitballing, right? Faster than anybody else, because maybe nobody else does that. But it could be very interesting for visitors and searchers, because obviously if I search for somebody's routine, right, one of the questions I ask myself is, oh, does this work for me? Does this work for my circumstance and my position? Does this work for my goals, right? Maybe there are fitness routine, or certain daily routines for people who have fitness goals or career goals or something else. And so I think it can create a lot of context and satisfy user intent much, much better than large companies who either go with the old playbook, or they move much, much slower and they need legal review for using AI tools and those kind of things. So I think there's lots of cool opportunities with that play, and lots of ways to create value.
I agree. Let's take some questions because we have some interesting ones here. Here's one from Eric. Eric, thank you. How should we talk to business leaders about content value, quote unquote content value, as organic traffic declines, especially for B2B companies? Should we focus on the brand storytelling aspect, sales enablement, something else?
Yeah. So I think you have to make a decision, right? Do you pitch content as a brand channel or vehicle, or do you go down the performance route? And it depends a little bit on what the company wants. If the company, it depends a bit on culture and expectations, but if the company wants the performance aspect, then one way to quickly validate keywords is to bid on them in paid search. Maybe you spin up a quick landing page if there's no content for that keyword yet. And then just measure, do we get any signals from paid, like signups, conversions, maybe engagement, maybe click-throughs, just to see, hey, are these keywords even valuable? And that would also allow you to prioritize which content to create first. If it's more the brand route, then I would go after, like low-hanging fruits, high impression, high click keywords, high traffic. But I think you have to make that decision first. Like, what does the client expect? And if they don't know exactly, then I'll probably, consider what vertical you're in, and what the business model is. So, for example, SaaS companies with a sales team that sell a very expensive product, it's really hard to prove the exact value of every piece of content because the attribution is just so difficult. If you have a self-serve startup, maybe in the consumer space, it's much, much easier and you can test into it. So I would define different strategies based on the client's expectation, the market, and the business model, and then make an informed decision based on that. But I think in most cases, you'll have to decide, is this going to be a brand play or is this going to be a performance play?
That makes sense. We have a question from Joanna. Joanna, thank you for your question. And Joanna asks, do you think that considering low volume strategy pursuit, the earlier SaaS companies focus on this direction, the better they might be long-term, considering what is / high volume is highly saturated? I guess what Joanna asks is, there's a lot of saturation for, what is and informational queries, and especially with SG changing the game, is it worth like chasing these like queries, or should companies take another route and go a bit lower volume but maybe higher reward?
I think if the younger the company is, the more it makes sense to go after low volume, high reward keywords. There is another factor here where, again, it depends so much on what the company sells and who it sells it to. Even for established company, it can sometimes make sense to go after lower search volume but higher intent keywords. But given the context about AI overviews, in general, all the what is keywords make less and less sense, right? These like what is or definition of or very basic how-to guides, I think those have less value in the future. And so, yeah, I would, especially as a new company, focus more on these longer tail queries, more complex queries, and ideally any query where, people are searching for a human opinion or experience or maybe advice from an expert. These also typically are really well suited. So, for example, if you have a question again about medicine, about law, about finance, or anything else, any high purchase item, those are always great keywords to go after because it's very likely that people might get a little bit of information from an AI overview, but they will click through to a source that looks trustworthy to make sure they get an answer from a quote unquote expert.
That makes sense. We will take one more question from Maya. Maya, even though we kind of touched on it when I asked about strategy, the question is there a point in changing the content strategy solely because of AI overviews? I have an answer, but I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Look, not before we get more data. Right now, it's very early data, and it's not enough yet to say that's the de facto situation. Also, these things are evolving over time. So I would give it another 3 to 6 months before you turn the steering wheel around and do a hard pivot. It's good to start thinking about what the future strategy could be. It's good to collect data, but I don't think that we have yet enough data to say this doesn't work anymore or that definitely works.
I agree, and that's what we say to our clients. when they ask us whether we should change our strategy, and what I answer is that we wouldn't make any changes because, first of all, this whole thing is very new, and second, we wouldn't want to make any changes that we wouldn't have made had it not been for SG. Does that make sense? Like, if we take a different direction or we slightly adjust, we would do it with or without SG. That's how I see it.
Exactly. I very much agree with you, George. And again, if you pivot a strategy, there needs to be a strong database behind it. So maybe you have that data, right? And maybe you can already tell where the road is going, but I would give it a bit more time.
Yeah, I agree. One question from Liam. Hey guys, do you think in the future SEO tasks / strategy, two different things, of course, will vary depending on the search engine, or will there always be a universal SEO? Thank you, Liam.
It is an interesting question because so many people are dissatisfied with Google, and yet I don't think there is going to be another search engine similar to Google. I could either, and I'm not saying Google is dying. I'm not saying the future is ChatGPT, but I'm just saying I don't think there's going to be a direct competitor to Google. I think the competition will come from something like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Gemini. I mean, Gemini is from Google, right? But like a chatbot experience. So I don't know if that's true yet, but I just don't see search in its current form being replaced with another search engine. I think the future of search could look very different, and that could mean there's a different competitor. And then obviously we need to adjust our strategy to something very different. But no, I would not adjust my SEO strategy, to a different search engine, unless we're including search engines like Amazon and YouTube as under the definition of search engine. Then of course, yeah, they play after different rules.
That makes sense. One more question from Kirkland, who is still here. So let's answer this one. How do you think AI overviews will affect long tail programmatic SEO? For example, use case based template queries, SOP template for project managers, as an example. Do you think it will remove the need for those kinds of long tail programmatic pages? I don't know about long tail in general, but the one you mentioned, I think there will always be the need for, if I'm looking for a template, I'm looking for a template. I don't know how Google can give me that template, even though, who knows, like in the future, maybe they have AIs creating templates on the go, right? Who knows about that? But I don't know. For the time being, I think they will still serve results that can satisfy these queries. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a good question. Because on the one hand, I think the biggest value for AI overviews actually is in the long tail. Google has traditionally served very poor results in the long tail and had a very poor understanding of user intent in the long tail, despite using AI for years. But I wouldn't be surprised if AI overviews lean more into the long tail. And I think that they could maybe give an answer to a template-based query. But the question is, how much expertise does that template demand, right? So if we're talking about something like, let's say, a template for a government contract, not sure if you would want to take that from an AI. It could be that it's more preferable to take that from an expert. And so if I was a company that was a marketplace for government contracts and I want to drive traffic through government contract templates, I would lean heavily into my expertise and say, hey, these government contract templates are created by experts, vetted by experts. They've been proven and used before. And I think that's a differentiator to a generic template you might get from AI. I haven't seen any templates from AI overviews yet. And again, I could see maybe they can export something into Google Docs. But the question is, how good are they? And the question is, do people want something from an expert? And so that's the way you want to think about, quote unquote, improving your chances of getting a click-through in AI overviews, is to think about, does the user intent demand expertise? Does it demand experience? Does it demand an input from a human? And in that case, you want to fully lean into that make it very clear in your content that this is, again, vetted or created by experts, and then also reflect that in your title, your description, etc., so that you incentivize people to click through instead of using the AI generated template.
I have two more questions, and then we will start wrapping things up. The first is, do you see the current technology stack being able to keep up with these search engines? Is there room for maybe new SaaS players?
Yes, I think there's room for new SaaS players. And the first thought I had when you mentioned technology stack is, and we haven't mentioned this yet, but AI goes both ways, right? Right now, there's a lot of progress and movement in AI on search engines, used by search engines, but we as marketers can also use AI, right? And so I think we can gain competitive advantages by using AI to better understand user intent, the composition of the search results. We can do n-gram analysis with AI, right? So there's lots of ways to use AI to gain a competitive advantage. The other part of your question is, I think, is there a place for new entrants in SaaS and SEO? And what we should not forget is that there are many new queries that Google sees every day. So the web is not static, or search is not static in that sense, but as new things come up, new queries gain importance in search. And these queries, as we talked about earlier, if they're young and early, they might not have a lot of competition. So think about the word chatbot or AI chatbot, right? Or LLMs. That people weren't searching really until ChatGPT became so popular for that term. Now it's a very competitive category, or AI writers and those kind of things. So don't forget that there's new queries all the time on Google, and there's always an opportunity to position yourself early in these types of queries. So, when we talk about a new technology stack, I assume that means a new field or space. If you try to be one of the 150 calendar apps or AI writer apps, that might be a bit more difficult, right? But if you have a differentiated product and maybe a new category, there's still lots of opportunity.
Actually, I posed this question from the standpoint of, are tools like, I don't know, Ahrefs or SEMrush enough? Can they keep up with these changes? And whether there may be some room for new SEO SaaS that are, let's say, more focused on what's happening right now with SGE.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, I know this game is not. I know it's not easy to build an SEO tool and adapt to changes, but I think that there are massive gaps in AI SEO tools, just in general SEO tools, not even AI related. Massive gaps, and that's why a lot of companies build their own tools. At Shopify, we build a whole tool suite, like a complete tool suite just for ourselves. So yes, lots of opportunities still, and that opportunity grows because Google is giving us less and less data in organic search. And so we need to piece it together more and more with third-party data. First-party data is getting so much worse, especially with AI overviews, right? Maybe we're getting clicks and impressions, but that's it. And so that means there's a massive gap. And yes, I think there's tons of opportunity, especially right now, to build some new stuff.
That's what I think. So thank you. Last question. What message would you like to leave to brands, publishers, websites relying on SEO for their organic growth, and also people working in the SEO industry? Because this may not be the easiest period for them as well. So what's the message you would like to leave and communicate to these people?
My message would be that it's easy to get frozen in fear. I think we all feel that. I certainly feel that. There are days where I see what's going on right now. I just feel fear, right? Like, is all of this going away? Does it still make sense? Is it still worth investing in it? I've spent 15 years in this space. Do I have to figure out something else? And so I think we all experience fear on a lot of time. I see it on Twitter as well and other social networks. And it's easy to get frozen like a deer in the headlights, But I think it's important to turn that fear into something productive and acknowledge that there were many shifts over the last 15 years, and we've always been able to figure it out and find new playbooks and things that work. And so I think it's important to turn that fear into energy that is productive. And instead of getting frozen, to kind of move forward and see how can we test, how can we learn, how can we adapt? Because we've adapted for a long time, and I don't believe that the game is over tomorrow or in the next couple of years. It will certainly change, but I believe that we as a community can adapt and we can figure it out. And so the most important thing is to not get stuck, but move forward and learn and adapt.
And at the end of the day, I think that SEO's, like job and function inside a company, whatever the company is, to drive growth or at least support growth. And so even if search changes to the point where it's nothing like what we know today, SEOs will always have a place in growth departments in companies by simply learning new skills and adapting and testing things out and so on. So as I see it, it's not the end all. SEO is not the end all and be all when it comes to growth. It's a channel, and it has treated us well for a long period of time. It's changing, but it's also not the end of the world. Like, it may be just a search feature, right? What's happening right now. Having that said, the changes that we all have to apply moving forward, I think were changes that we should have applied regardless of whether Google would roll out SEO or not. That's it. That's a wrap. Kevin, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. I hope we covered as many questions as we could. And Kevin, last note from you: where can people find out more and get in touch?
Yeah, sure. Two ways. One is my advisor website, kevin-indig.com. The other one is the Growth Memo newsletter, which is growth-memo.com, not thegrowthmemo.com. That's a common fault, but that's a different newsletter. Mine is growth-memo.com. But yeah, thank you so much, George and team, for having me. This was a treat. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone.